SIG PM meeting for 2019. It's January 15th. This is a meeting that will be recorded, or is being recorded right now. It will be available on the internet, so please be sure to adhere to the Kubernetes community code of conduct. Yeah, let's get started. We have Aaron Krickenberger here, who is the Kubernetes 1.14 release team lead, as well as heavily involved in SIG testing and SIG release, and kind of on the steering committee, and has his hands in a bunch of different things. So he is interested in talking a little bit about KEPs and how we're moving forward on that, and kind of driving down some of the questions that SIGs have had across starting the release cycle. So I won't talk too much. Aaron, I'll let you take it away.
Cool. That's a ton of fantastic context setting. So I'm approaching this from two different directions. The higher level direction is sort of just trying to figure out ownership of this whole thing. I kind of prompted that discussion by opening up two pull requests, which are linked in the meeting notes, and I'll go ahead and share my screen just so we can see them while I talk about them. The first is first, I don't know how many of you are familiar with, man, I hate Zoom's little buttons over the top thing. So we have a board here that Stephen put together that sort of tracks our progress of trying to make KEPs like the really real thing for reals, for tracking work. And I am, for better or for worse, trying to shove the community forward without all of this stuff having been done, or all of the I's dotted or all of the T's crossed. I'll get to that in a minute. So one of the things that was done as part of that effort was to rename the repo formerly known as features to enhancements. And so I found a place where that hadn't yet been done, which is in the sub-projects fields for the different SIGs. For those of you who are new here, within Kubernetes, organizationally, it's very flat. We have a bunch of SIGs, and then SIGs own sub-projects. So that's sort of the level of hierarchy there. We also have working groups, which are time-bounded and span SIGs. The idea is working groups disband once they accomplish their time-bounded goal, and they have been formed because whatever it is they're trying to do requires coordination amongst a lot of different SIGs. The difficulty here is SIG architecture's name has been used an awful lot in the context of KEPs and enhancements. So if I go to the community repo and I go take a look at SIG architecture, and I scroll down here to details about their sub-projects, one of their sub-projects is KEP adoption and reviews. But if I look at the way the sub-projects are laid out in this file, the enhancements, the now called enhancements repo, is under the purview of SIG PM. So I kind of feel like Stephen expressed some opinions here that I can let him voice if he has more color, but I heard and agree with this concept that, like, y'all are SIG PM, you probably know how to do process and organization, and maybe it seems to make sense if y'all are the ones who, like, are in charge of the process. And SIG architecture brings to the table the bright technical minds that make sure that the appropriate reviews are being done in the appropriate places, or what have you. My concern here is that historically the SIG hasn't actually done that much. And I just kind of want things to move forward. So this PR, all it does is rename features to enhancements and doesn't try and tangle up who owns what part of this process. But since it prompted that discussion, I will hand it back over to Stephen to see what you want to talk about here with respect to that.
Hey, yeah, so I'll also let Ihor voice his opinion too. So I'm totally in agreement with what you said just now. The fact that I believe that SIG PM should organize the process and procedure around how we deliver KEPs and enhancements in general, and that SIG architecture will be on board and continue to be on board for things like large technical direction, understanding how enhancements can affect essentially cross SIG efforts and affect the project on the whole, as well as continuing to do things like API reviews. So that's my 2 cents for the record. I have also come into this post post SIG PM spin up. So some of the history that's around that, I'm not intimately familiar with. I do think that putting something firmly in SIG PM's court will allow us to actually have some sort of trajectory and actually do good work. I think this is a good example of work that we can do, and a lot of the interactions that I had with people during KubeCon were around the fact that they're like, hey, we didn't even know this existed. We'd love to get involved. It was a room full of product program and project managers who were like, hey, we didn't know we could contribute to Kubernetes like this. So how can we make it happen? And kind of making that something concrete that isn't in the heads of like maybe 7 people would be one of my major goals for 2019.
Yeah, I'm a second that, and I'm really appreciative about the effort that was put into all these direction shows. Just to recall that SIG PM was one of the early SIGs within the Kubernetes community, and as we mentioned that during KubeCon at the intro session, that we started SIG PM a few years ago when so many different SIGs, including SIG architecture and SIG release and some others, didn't exist. So our scope has notably changed during the last time. And also the concept of features that was originally developed within the PM group today doesn't exist as well, but it was organically transformed into enhancements, and the current movement is the great sample how we are all moving forward with the current changes. Thanks everyone for being involved here, and we are happy to see new faces at our meetings, and we're happy to move forward with all that stuff.
So I want to give a real quick chance, just given the subject, to get additional opinions instead of people who are always talking on chat. So if anyone has opinions about this, definitely just jump in. Say who you are. I think we've got a lot of new faces here, so say who you are, what you do, and
I can also provide a little more additional context if it's at all helpful.
Yeah, go for it.
Because I don't know how, sorry, a lot of meetings today. I don't know how much good I'm doing at context setting. So let me back way up. KEPs were started because it's seen as difficult to coordinate and track work across multiple releases of Kubernetes. And this work has initially been done by use of issues in a repo that was formerly known as features and is now known as enhancements to line up with Kubernetes enhancement proposal, which is what KEP stands for. And I feel like KEPs have been vociferously expressed as a great idea, but not actually tactically implemented and driven all the way to completion. So folks like Joe Bita and Caleb Miles and Stephen have had their hands on this, but I don't think I've ever seen one true owner. And for a little while, I've started raising SIG architecture's name when I start to talk about KEPs and driving them forward, because SIG architecture seems to be becoming the focal point for consistent, standardized decision-making when it comes to the architectural principles of Kubernetes and some of the technical concerns that some enhancements may bring to the table. So things like what is a Kubernetes in the context of a Windows node versus a Linux node, or what are the appropriate boundaries to draw between different components, things of that nature. So then I also sort of have seen that the release team has turned into the de facto project managers for the Kubernetes project. So they don't necessarily do project management for the 100 and something different repos, which make up different sub-projects here, things like COPS or the cluster API or the cloud providers. What they're in charge of is making sure that we know what's actually going to be landing in the Kubernetes release and the set of bits that are cut as a result of that. Historically, what lands in that release is everything that's in the Kubernetes repository. And we also have opinions about what lands in the Kubernetes website repository, since that's the set of docs that gets cut at the same time, same life cycle as the Kubernetes release. It also means we keep track of some projects which started in the Kubernetes repo, but maybe we hope one day might not live there ultimately. So something like kubeadm would be an example of that. And the cloud provider code is being moved out of tree over a gradual basis. So I'm just trying to set the stage for where I'm coming from there. I'm interested in trying to make sure that the release team doesn't have to do technical due diligence on each and every feature or enhancement or what have you that lands in the Kubernetes release. And instead, we're just consumers of checklists that say, yes, this is good, or no, this hasn't met its criteria to land. When I say land, I think I'm saying that a given enhancement has been implemented and we're ready to call it alpha or beta or stable. And the list of requirements to call something alpha or beta or stable is as of yet undocumented. So I'm trying to suss out like which is the appropriate group to own that. It kind of seems like maybe it's SIG architecture since they have cross-cutting concerns. But I'm also interested in figuring out what's the process by which we build that checklist and then make sure that checklist gets checked off. So I sort of felt like KEPS might be the place for that checklist to live. And I feel like KEPS thus far are documents that sort of describe the motivation for why this enhancement is being proposed and why it's being proposed in this way, and then what some of the graduation criteria are for this, though the graduation criteria have never really been implemented.
Right. So this is Terrence's point. This is something that I've also mentioned on during the SIG architecture Birds of a Feather in Seattle KubeCon, as well as on the last SIG architecture meeting, I think the last one. We don't have the concept of project-wide graduation criteria. So while we do state, while we do like leave a field or a requirement for graduation criteria within KEPS, I think that they should fall subject to the wider project-wide graduation criteria. And because we don't have that, we're kind of in the state where people can decide that, oh well, once once this thing happens or someone fills out this survey or does this arbitrary step, we can graduate it from here to here without having like a consistent consensus across the entire project of what that should look like. So I think until we do have that, we're going to keep on running into issues like this. And I think that defining project-wide graduation criteria is something that firmly falls into the scope of SIG architecture as opposed to SIG PM.
Right. But keeping track of that, I feel like, is a process thing. And so that's where I feel like you fall. So I'm sorry, I probably am rambling a bunch, but I am trying to give a bunch of context. So the way we used to keep track of whatever that checklist might be was to mandate that the issues in the feature repo were, that they had a consistent set of fields in their description. So things like, where's your design proposal? What's the one-line description of this feature?
Hey, Aaron, can you pull that up? I think it'd be valuable for people to just
Sure. So let's find.
Let's pull up a good one like the yeah, okay, all right.
This is decent. So what's the one-line description? Who's the primary contact for this? What's the responsible SIG? Notice this lines up with the labels that are put on it. Where's the design proposal? Could we link to some of the tests that are being done here? Who are the reviewers? Who are the approvers? And then what's the plans for targeting this? So this checklist isn't sufficient, is what I've been finding. For one, this is actually, I'm shocked. I've actually finally bumped into one that actually does link to some tests. almost every feature description I've ever run into doesn't actually provide any sort of test plan. And so what I, as a release team lead, am really interested in is like, what is your test plan? Can I see that your tests, where are they, and are they passing? And I also kind of want to understand, like, if your feature has any complications related to upgrade or downgrade, what's the plan with that? So the way I have been expressing this for a couple months is I feel like every chunk of code, every substantial chunk of code that is destined to land in Kubernetes needs to have an enhancement tracking issue. That's been nothing new. But what I'm proposing is that it must link to a KEP. And that KEP is where I want to start to move more of this standardized information so that the KEP becomes the source of truth for things like the test plan and a checklist for what means alpha, what does it mean to be beta, what does it mean to be stable, stuff like that.
So yeah, so for some additional context, I think this is a lot of context setting. Both Ihor and I have been features leads on the Kubernetes release teams for a few cycles. Myself taking over for Ihor in like 1.11, 1.12, something like that. And the experience essentially has been someone comes into the features repo, they fill out this feature, hopefully it's complete. And we, the first part of the cycle up to features freeze or enhancements freeze is that we attempt to, you can see a comment from Claire right there that, hey, I'm the enhancements lead. I'm looking to fill in this info. I want to make sure that you have these things in line, which includes a KEP, and make sure your KEP is updated and things like that, right? So a lot of it is, a lot of the first part of the release cycle is essentially cat herding, making sure that people are filling in the things that they need to. I will say that towards the end of that, there is a bit of fatigue if people aren't responding. So this is essentially one or two people reaching out to people across 31 SIGs to get information about the features that are going to be landed. So just for that ratio, you can tell that it's kind of untenable for just a few people to be doing. So there needs to be a succinct process in place to get that done. What I have found doing it for a little bit, and I'm sure that Ihor would agree, is that there gets to a point where you hope that all of the information is filled out, and you try to interpolate as much of it as possible, but you stop nagging and you move on to the next task, essentially. So if there was a process in place, and I think KEPs are the process to do that, to kind of obviate the need for the constant cat herding, that I think that would be beneficial to the entire community. One of the requirements for that that enhancement tracking issue was to include a design proposal or a KEP, right? So this is not like new information for people. They should have already been doing it, but because we have that slippage between essentially submitting the issue and figuring out, if the proposal's done, if the proposal's not done, what kind of state it's in, if someone forgets to link to it, that's context that we lose across tracking you can see that there are 129 issues in the enhancements repo alone, and that's in addition to the issues that may be scattered across the Kubernetes repo and the 152 plus repos that we maintain as a Kubernetes org overall. So this is a lot of stuff to like grab your hands around, and it's I'm happy to see so many new faces on the call to help figure this out. So I think that maybe we should do less rambling, Aaron, and hit the agenda and try to have some actionable things.
I was going to say, so the reason I'm setting all of this context is like, I want to bulldog this, and I need some people to help me bulldog this. The motivated parties are like this group. If you're a bunch of project managers, I'm trying to do project management, and I could really use some help there. SIG architecture has historically been where a lot of the discussion has happened, but I kind of agree with Stephen that I don't think they should be the arbiters of process if you best understand how to make process work. And then I'm from the release team, so I'm really interested in tactically what can I do right now today, because today is kind of all I have from a release perspective. I can't plan on what you might have implemented in a couple weeks from now. So
yeah, so to provide even more context for the release team is a team of about 8 to 10 people that are the leads for their roles, and then they have, and then they have their shadows, right? So essentially the release leads are responsible for maintaining a handbook of the processes and procedures that are required to actually implement a Kubernetes release in their specific roles. So we've got the release team lead, kind of coordinates, he's the grand cat herder, the enhancements, CI signal, bug triage, docs, release notes. So all of these roles have people behind them, but again, realize that they're trying to execute across a single release cycle, which is it's about a quarter, but honestly, it's less than a quarter if you figure in logistics and holidays and all these kinds of things. So realize again, it's a small team working across the entire project, wrapping their hands across this entire project. So any help that we can have moving obstacles out of their way, making things easier for them is really the goal.
And I'm also trying to so I'm looking for a decider, and I'm looking for, I think, more than just Stephen to be the decider here. So historically, Caleb Miles has been the other decider. I'm not sure how active a participant he is in this group, and if there are project managers or product managers who are interested in helping out here, I would certainly love for you to come on board and I think have a long chat with Stephen and I, because what I need the deciders to decide is, like, I want to get rid of the design proposal link in all of the feature descriptions that we just showed you and instead replace that with a link to the KEP. And Stephen's point is, well, we should not do that until we've actually updated the KEP template to link to design proposals. I agree, that's totally fair. So if I were to then go take a look at the KEP template, which is in the enhancements repo, and it's got all zeros, like, if I start opening up pull requests to this, is this the appropriate group to put all these pull requests to? Should there be consensus building amongst a bunch of other SIGs? If there should, I could use help on that, because I'm kind of overtaxed.
So yeah, so currently if you open up, so Aaron, if you just scroll up, we'll give them and fall back to like just the KEPs repo, just the KEPs, well, scroll up, sorry, yeah, and go to KEPs and then owners. Oh, scroll down, and then owners. Right, so that'll give you an idea of who the people who actually get signaled to take a look at things that land in that top level repo. Right, so it's all of the leads of SIG architecture: Caleb, Ihor, Joe, myself, for reviews, and then you can see the approvers here. So when a Kubernetes PR gets submitted, often we'll have these owner files defined in each of the repos that will allow people to. There's a bunch of automation magic that happens that will signal these people and tag them for reviews on PRs, changes to things that are within that directory.
Right. My goal here is I want one place to talk about this. I don't want to have to go talk about this at like 3 or 4 different places. Y'all as a SIG have historically been pretty dormant. And so if it makes sense to continue the discussion over in SIG architecture where it has historically happened, I will happily do that. But if you are interested and motivated to help out and take the discussion over here and try to take on ownership, I am very interested in that.
Hey, Aaron, this is Craig. And I am definitely interested in helping make that happen.
Okay.
Awesome, Craig.
I'll
see you've been active the last few weeks. Is that Lockie?
Yeah, I'll throw my hat in the ring too. If just to clarify, I'm trying to play back what I heard. It sounds like you need, the ask is to have somebody shepherd not only the ownership of the templating, but the making sure the KEP process is completed in its entirety and defining, filling out more of the checklist, which would be templating as to bits that need to be, so that I think, the role that we could play is making sure that we're handing off a complete document as it relates to a KEP for release team and SIG architecture to then review rather than them having to chase. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's a large part of it. And honestly, like this is, you know, part of this is also a gut check, right? You know, this is a process that's kind of been developed amongst a few people, and I want to make sure that we're doing it from a product and program and project technically sound place, right? So if there's anything that is currently in the templates that don't make sense, I want to hear about it. I think the biggest thing that we can do right now is like get a gut check of what's currently there. Let me share my screen real quick.
Can I ask 1 or 2 questions?
Sure, go for it.
Is KEP the only entry point now, or is still the existing design proposals still a large part? So when you're for 114, all the enhancements KEP based?
So I believe we're most of the way there, but there are still like enhancement issues that are open that link to all the design proposals. So the hope is that you know, I have a few tasks here that are in the backlog right now. So cleaning up the design proposals directory, right? So there's an existing directory in Kubernetes community that has a bunch of design proposals, and some of them are active, some of them are implemented, some of them are entirely stale. So having someone kind of go in and coordinate some of that stuff. I realized when I migrated the KEPs over to Kubernetes Enhancements, I was going to try to do the same so essentially, like, we have this idea of like blockades, right? So once we can implement a blockade within specific Kubernetes directories, repo directories that essentially have it takes a regex and basically says like, hey, this is why you can't push changes to files in this directory, right? So this one says KEPs have been relocated to Kubernetes Enhancements. Please submit any updates there, right? So I wanted to do something similar for the design proposals directory, but because we have, what did I close this one with? So because we have the issue of like some of them are, so I want to instead encourage SIGs to do it themselves, right? So encourage per directory blockades, because some of the stuff that's in there is still active, some of it's stale. Like the best person who's going to be able to tell that are like SIG leadership and people who have been working in SIGs. So pushing this, I would love to see. Have each SIG kind of work up a plan of cleaning up the stuff that's in their design proposals directories and bringing it in line with the KEP template, right? Another thing that we definitely need to work on is the KEP template itself, right? So there are issues that are up around, so this is the full, this issue essentially encapsulates, so this is like PM has the, so this in my idea, like in my mind, this is what an enhancement tracking issue should look like, right? It's pretty close to what Aaron showed you before, right? But essentially responsible SIGs, the design proposals, right? So this is a link to the, well, okay, a link that needs to be fixed. So these are 2 links to KEPs, which I will fix after this call. This KEP in particular has no unit tests or end-to-end tests required. We clearly see who the reviewers are and who the approvers were for the KEPs, and what the targets are for moving them into different states, right? And then from there, I also put down high-level implementation plan of what needs to happen. And this is kind of like spit out verbatim from what the KEP is, right? So the KEP should inform a lot of this information, right? I shouldn't have to put this on, I shouldn't have to put this on an issue, but I did this for visibility, right? And then from there, you know, each of these issues that were created for this project board are linked back to this enhancement issue. So the idea being that this enhancement issue acts as kind of the KEP combined with the enhancement issue act as kind of the steel thread to understand how everything is tying together around the implementation of this work, right? So I think the biggest things that can happen now are to be able to really update the features enhancement repo documentation. And this is something that I'm taking on, as well as the so updating the KEP templates themselves. And I had a chat. So Aaron, I had a chat with Phil Whitrock yesterday about him offering to take that up. So he's going to be working something up based on the chats that you had with him in SIG apps, and I will take a review of that. If he doesn't get to it, he's going to hand it back off to me. But he figured since he was actually part of that chat, that all of the questions that were raised were valid questions and that he could easily document them. So we're going to wait to see that.
So I
Yeah.
just
Yes, Steven. Yeah, just a quick question from
go ahead.
collision. Just a quick question, Steven. So do we have our public, let's call it roadmap of the KEP implementation? So if we're going to switch to KEP process completely, starting on 1.15 or when and so on. So do we have that like entire KEP process codified somewhere?
So the KEP process is defined within it's like kind of a meta situation. The process itself is defined in a KEP. So give me a second while my computer freezes. Awesome, love it.
Yeah, I'm specifically more interested in KEP plus release integration.
Right, so KEP plus release integration, this is kind of like just the conversations that we've been having over the past few days. We do need to codify that. So honestly, the people who are part of the conversations are the best ones to codify that. That's myself, Aaron, Phil. So Phil, I think, being the furthest away from the process, but the most one of the consumers of the process, I think it's a good opportunity for a consumer to try to understand what we're driving at here. But the KEP proposal itself, the KEP, the meta KEP 001 defines what the expectations are from a KEP standpoint, and the type of work that you should track within a KEP, and as well as the associated metadata that is evolved in a KEP, and that quick start that's within that's the top level of the repo. So we'll tell you exactly how to file a KEP following the 0000. That's a KEP template. So anyone following this will get a KEP that is to this date well formed. In future dates, it will not be well formed, but we're working on tooling to fix that.
So just to add some color here, I feel like I'm a bull in a china shop, and I'm saying we're using KEPs now with whatever we have.
Absolutely agreed. Absolutely agreed. That's what we're doing.
Steven is trying to be like responsible and tell you what the long-term plan is and do nice things like document what that process should be and maybe how we're going to use automation to simplify that and stuff. And I'm impatient and trying to just drag us forward, kicking and screaming to figure out what we can do right now. And if this is not what I should be doing, I need enough people to stand up and say no, and then help me figure out how to like learn from the lessons of 113 and make this consistent. But like, I do think it is important that there's like the longer term strategic view, but I'm interested in concrete asks for the now. So like, for example, in this template, it talks about KEP should be implementable. And then when you're done, it moves to implemented. And I feel like the transition from implementable to implemented is like a year-long process.
A chasm.
Right? I feel like there are a couple stages that are missing in between in that state transition diagram. And to me, it makes more sense to talk about going from implementable to alpha to beta to stable. And then maybe even to deprecated if you sort of talk about the life cycle of some enhancement or something.
Yeah, so Aaron brought this up to me today, and I was like, "Whoa, that is a great idea! Like, why are we not doing that?" So you can see the current state, the current statuses of KEPs: provisional, implementable, implemented, deferred, rejected, withdrawn, or replaced. Right. So obviously, replaced is some KEP was created that supersedes the KEP that currently exists. So you would mark that in the implementation history and kind of officially deprecate that KEP. Withdrawn, for whatever reason, the KEP author decides that it's not a good idea and we're going to move in a different direction, and they pull that. Rejected means the SIG or whoever else was reviewing that KEP decided that it was not feasible for the project for whatever reasons that they state on the PRs that would submit that KEP, and then those decisions would be documented so that we have some sort of history so we don't repeat it, right? Deferred means deferred is kind of like subject to SIG interpretation. Like if they decide that their deferment period is a few cycles or a year, right? Whatever their definition. I don't think I've seen a KEP that's been officially deferred yet. But yeah, in between here, I think there is a huge opportunity for having KEPs move through the states that the associated enhancement and features move through, right? So that's a great idea. Aaron suggested that to me right before the call, and I was like, whoa, why did we not think of that? Yeah, so that's something that I'd like to incorporate into the process after some discussion.
So what I plan on doing is starting to open up PRs for all of this stuff and start pushing this forward, right? That's how I'm going to be rolling here. But if we do need to have a higher bandwidth discussion with the appropriate stakeholders, then I'll go that route. And so this is sort of a preemptive high bandwidth discussion to let y'all know where I'm coming from. The second tactical ask that I have based on discussions I just had this morning is there's a very reasonable ask that some people are trying to move features that have been languishing in alpha to beta or languishing in beta to stable, where they feel like it's overdue and they've already written lots of documentation to meet the needs of a KEP. And is there some way they could do some kind of shortcut or something like that? And I want to be reasonable and pragmatic about that, but I also feel like I want to see kind of that documented decision in the form of a checklist. So I would certainly appreciate some guidance on how best to accommodate that situation. What I was thinking was suggesting that they can open up something that looks an awful lot like a KEP, and then they can link to a lot of their prior art that describes how they got to now. And then if they're trying to move from, say, beta to stable, then they can describe why they, what qualified them for beta or whatever. But more importantly, why they think they are now ready to move to stable. So one of the examples I ran into was the huge pages feature that is enabled by default. This is a SIG node feature. It currently lives in beta, but it's turned on by default and has been so for a number of release cycles. So it feels like it would be unfair to expect them to now retroactively go through and describe all of the motivation and then talk about a whole bunch of performance characteristics and all sorts of stuff when the work has been done and it's out there and actively supported by vendors. They just want to flip the switch. I hear that, but I still feel like the decision for why they want to flip the switch is the part that I'm more interested in seeing documented, less so that historical context.
Absolutely. So, I mean, I think that switch flipping characteristic often we'll see, and I know that this is the state of affairs for a lot of vendors, that they won't turn on certain features unless they're a certain state, right? So really having, so I know from the from vendors that I've worked at, we won't touch features that aren't beta, right? So it then becomes well, if we don't have people consuming this at the alpha stage, how do we know that we can graduate it to beta? Or let's graduate it to beta simply for the sake of having more people consume that feature or that enhancement, right? And I don't think that that's a fair state of affairs. So again, I'm going to push it in every meeting that I go to. We need global graduation criteria. If someone has a checklist somewhere, and I think we're talking about what that checklist would be, then it's easy to go back to that checklist and say, well, here's what the project says. Here's what needs to be done for something to graduate, right? And it no longer becomes a discussion. It becomes, here are the hard requirements, right? Maybe there's flexibility in those requirements, maybe, right? But at least having something that's documented gives us an out in discussions like that. So definitely agree. Aaron, again, context setting for Aaron. Aaron is working on driving this stuff forward because he has a window of 3 months to get a release out the door, right? And needs to make sure that some of this stuff is in a good state or in a readable state for his team to action on, right? So I appreciate the bull in a china shop method, Aaron. I think that forward progress is progress. So anyone driving that is okay in my book. Let's make sure that we're also taking a look at the rest of the stuff that's on the agenda.
I was going to say, I want to be respectful to the rest of your agenda. I don't want to eat up the rest of your time, but the other like little grenade I'll roll out there, I can propose this in an issue we can discuss there, is the idea that I don't think enhancement issue, it'd be a lot easier for me if those enhancement tracking issues only tracked a single phase or a single, I think phase is what I'm looking for. So instead of having one issue transition from alpha to beta to stable and migrating from milestone to milestone to milestone over the year or whatever of something's implementation, I would love to see those transitions happen in the KEP and instead see an issue that represents the work to push this to alpha and then close that issue when it's done and leave it in the milestone that represents the release where that work was done. And then do the same thing for moving to beta. That way I could retroactively go and query what are all of the feature issues or enhancement issues that were done in 1.14, and I could historically see like what's been done over time.
So yeah, so this is something that was on Caleb's mind as well, and the idea being that you would be able to take essentially exactly what you said, the issues that were opened within that cycle, and also bucket them into things that were implemented, things that slipped, or things that were withdrawn, right? So being able to have buckets within the KEP directory as well, or buckets within a release directory next to either the enhancements or I'm not sure whether it should be enhancements or SIG release, right? So the SIG release repo and releases, and being able to see exactly at a glance what landed, what didn't land, and the reasons behind that stuff would be super valuable.
Just to round this one out. Sorry, Stephen, you finished your point. I thought you were done. Sorry.
Yeah, go for it.
So what are the tactical points here? Like, give me 3 action items or whatever. Craig and I need something, and we'll come in and help. So what do you want to put as action items? Because I feel like we've talked about this, but unless we have something tactical, we're going to be here next week. I want to lead with execution.
For me, I got to leave you guys to discuss this because I need lunch before the next meeting. But I do think a lot of the mechanical work around messaging that we're not doing design proposals anymore. KEPs are subsuming design proposals, and all of the migration that's involved with that. There were a number of issues on that KEPs board that represent that work.
Yeah. So that Sorry.
So that board, tackling items on that board. Project board 5 or whatever it was.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So we can go in and look at that and either pair on at least getting up to speed, but we can take that as an action item, Craig and myself, to have a look at that board.
So so anything that you, I would say that at this point, a lot of those items are assigned to me. So anything that you touch, please just like give me a heads up so I can give you more context. A lot of them were like, this is all stuff that I've already written down in the KEP. Go look at the KEP. So anything that's kind of lacking context, just give me a heads up, so that we can kind of firm that up. I think communication.
And just feel free to point us to ones that you'd like some extra labor there.
Yeah, if there's low-hanging fruit you just want to delegate and you think it's ready to action, feel free to give that to us, Stephen.
Yeah, so I think what I would love to see is, so all of the things related to design proposals are in this backlog right now because I know that it's stuff that I can't tackle at the moment. If y'all want to get together and we'll figure out like a kind of a communication strategy around this to talk to each of the SIGs about bringing their design proposals into KEP format, right? I think that would be super valuable for me, like having more hands to kind of message that. On my side, I need to work with Phil to finish the template because any future any KEP that's created in the future will continue to not have the context that it needs if we don't fix that template. So the template and the documentation are on my plate. I will tag a bunch of you for reviews on that stuff. And then I think that if people are interested in starting to communicate to SIGs that we're trying to essentially disambiguate the design proposals from the designs that already live and are accepted, as well as bringing them into the KEPs that already are in Kubernetes enhancements. So sorry, that was sound good, or yeah, maybe.
Yes.
Sounds good to me.
SGTM.
Thank you all so much for taking the time to entertain this rambling discussion.
So let's make sure that we hit everything for realsies. I think we hit most of your points, Aaron. I want to make sure that you're satisfied before you have to leave. Are you?
Yeah, I got what I needed out of this. I do think I need closure on those PRs, but we can discuss that on those PRs.
Okay, sounds good.
So guys, before all of you leave, just I heard a lot of people ask for help. Just don't know how to reach for the new guys to reach out.
Right. So I have said both in the KubeCon talks and like people can reach out to me whenever they feel like. Raja, I've received your email. I think we might have chatted on Slack at some point. Like everyone should be pushing communication into the SIG PM Kubernetes Slack channel, right? That is the best place to do it. All of the PMs and DMs and emails and things that are separate threads, I eventually have to pull them together somewhere. And the best place for that is either the SIG PM mailing list or the SIG PM Slack channel.
Yeah, it's also easier for other folks to join the conversation, so it's not targeting a single person, but the entire group. And if you're asking a singular individual to help, you definitely can help. Someone else can help you with that. So let's keep all the conversations public in the public channels.
All right. So moving on, the next agenda item is the charter enhancement. So just a bit of context here, and this is another place that's ripe for participation. I think that myself or Ihor can put up the new charter, and then our super experienced product program and project managers can tear it apart. So we have a current charter that is essentially the README for our directory, right? So if you have ever been to Kubernetes community, you'll see that there is community, and then there are link to other directories for each of the SIGs, right? So each of the SIGs have their own directory. SIG release is a little special because their directory breaks out into its own repo, and then from but it gives you a list of the subprojects as well as the GitHub teams that you can contact. SIG release, this is just an example. They happen to have their own repo. But within these directories, you'll also see a charter, or you should see a charter, right? So the charters were mandated from the steering committee to give you an idea of exactly what is in scope for these SIGs, right? So this is, I use this as an example because I wrote this one and I know it's well formed. So it gives you scope, what's in scope for that team, what's out of scope for that team, the way the team organizes, what different roles they have. So something special for SIG release is that we have the idea of SIG members, right? So SIG members may be called upon within this SIG release group to talk about, to to gather feedback around different PRs or a release process that exists that shouldn't exist, or how we can improve things, different things like that, right? So there's a specific GitHub team for that, right? And that is kind of different from some of the other SIGs, right? And then we also define how to create sub-projects and what the sub-projects need to look like, or how they get approved, right? So we're looking to bring the SIG PM charter in line with what's expected from the steering committee. And the reason that we need to bring it in line is because SIG PM is one of the first SIGs, right? And one of the, well, started off as working group, but is one of the first like organizational structures that existed. And we have, like, this was essentially written well before the charters were mandated, right? So we need to just come back and make it fit. So Ihor, if you want to give additional context on that.
No, it's fine. Thank you, Stephen, for covering that. Specifically, I'm interested in having more caps covered in our chart as one of the target area of responsibility. I'm not sure that having a new charter and enhanced charter is the P0 priority for us. So we definitely have some time to work on that seriously and deliver that in the nearest time, but not immediately.
Yeah, so that's so from my perspective, I want to see that out the gate by the end of this quarter,
Yep.
and I think that that's entirely feasible for us to do. Everyone who is, and trust me, I've gotten all the DMs and emails and stuff like that. Everyone who is interested in this effort, I will involve in reviewing the charters and getting pulled into these different processes, so you can contribute to the project. Meeting notes.
Could you just summarize, is there an action item here?
Not currently.
Okay.
Unfortunately, because it's such a small group, there is a decent amount of like tribal knowledge that we need to like get on paper. So some of the things that are about like writing governing documents or templates for everyone else to follow have to be done by the people who are already doing them. Then that's just kind of like an unfortunate first step.
Yep.
Right.
Anyway, like if you have anything to add, just let us know. Like we can
sure.
we can start the shared document where everybody can contribute. But
I mean, from what I hear, I'd rather have our charter be kind of felt out based on the need that, we're hearing from, or the delegation of decision making that needs to happen. Because it sounds like, the release team doesn't want to or necessarily do this, nor should SIG architecture. So maybe that's something we do, but lead with kind of execution and start doing this. And if other people kick and scream and say, this is our thing to do, then we can address that. But it sounds like there's a need for the, enhancement process to be, governed at some place.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, absolutely.
So if we can take that and we can prove that we can do a good job at doing that, then, I think the charter will get behind us.
Sounds good.
I don't know. That would be my MO, rather than say, we're going to do this, let's do it. And then, then we can say, yes, this is, our...
They're actually doing it.
Because it's easy to say we're going to do it. Let's just do it. And then it sounds like, the folks that are involved are asking for help. So...
Yeah, for sure. All right, so I know that we rambled for a while. I want to make sure that it is 2 minutes till this meeting is done. So I want to make sure that we do a quick introductions or post intros. If everyone wants to go around real quick, I know Raja already introduced himself, but Lockie, you have been. Go for it. Why don't you
All right. Thanks. I'll catch the hot potato. Thanks. I'm Lockie 83 on GitHub. Thanks for the hat tip of how to track people by aliases. I'm on the upstream team at Microsoft, and we focus on all the cloud native compute projects and work in the CNCF. So I'll pass it over to Craig, and thanks for having me and putting up with me today. Pass to Craig.
Hey, thanks, Lockie. I work for Lockie on the upstream Kubernetes and other cloud native infrastructure teams at Microsoft. My GitHub handle is Craig L. Peters, and I'm Craig Peter. I think I'm C. Peters in the Kubernetes Slack.
All right, I've got Livio on my list next.
Hey guys, my name is Livio. I'm with Samsung SDS. I've jumped in and out of a couple of these meetings in the past, and really just looking like where are the best places to get started. A lot of these are very complex undertakings, and looking to see where I can help either chop some wood or get my feet wet in what you guys need.
Cool, welcome. Kevin.
Hey, I'm Kevin from Densify, just here as a new member, also trying to see what it is and potentially jump in.
All right, cool. We'll move on. Hey, Kevin. Thanks for joining. We've got, all right, Craig Went. Ihor, you want to introduce yourself real quick? It's for the people.
Sure. My name is Ihor. I'm a co-chair, one of the original co-founders of PM Working Group and of SIG PM. So I'm here to help all this stuff happen.
I realize I didn't introduce myself, so hi, I'm Stephen Augustus. I've got no camera because I'm looking frumpy today, but I'm the product management chair for SIG PM. I'm also SIG Release Chair and SIG Azure Chair, so feel free to reach out anytime. And last two, we've got Marky and Julian to round out the hour.
Hey guys, this is Marky. I work at SysDig. I'm a software engineer. I work on our Kubernetes and our Falco stuff. I'm looking to join release team, PM team. I'm also helping out SIG apps to get the cron job to GA. And I'm part of IBM Cloud too.
Awesome.
That's me.
And last up, Julian.
Hi, I'm a new community member. I'm just coming from KubeCon and had attended and saw like SIG PM's presentations. Looks really great. I'm just here to lurk.
Awesome. Thank you all for introducing yourselves. I think this is one of the larger meetings that we've had in recent history. So seriously, thank you all for jumping in, being interested in contributing, and bearing with us for over the holiday seasons and all that stuff while we're kind of sussing things out. So stay tuned. There will be work for you.
I actually counted 4 people from Seattle.
Huh?
I actually counted 4 people from Seattle. There was Aaron, there's a couple of people from Microsoft. I'm from Seattle. We should probably get together for a beer one of these days.
Yeah, sure. Feel free to shout out in the SIG PM channel. See if you can wrangle something together. All right, we are 2 minutes over at this point, so I am going to cut it. Thank you again for showing up. More work to come. Take it easy, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Thank you.